When adapting a book to screen, normally most of the main important characters make it onto screen, followed by more minor ones that, while fascinating and having their own role in the story being told, don't have enough impact on the overarching plotline, meaning they are often the first to fall to the wayside. Given the scale of a story such as A Song of Ice and Fire, it was always going to be a tough task to balance the main cast of characters, let alone adapt the minor ones, who are part of each of their storylines. We've seen it in the North, with many of the Night's Watch brothers not making it onto screen, and many of the Northern Lords having their roles massively reduced. You then also have cases such as Dawn, where entire main storylines are cut from the show. The same is true when it comes to the Ironborn story, where several major main characters were cut, with only a handful of supporting minor ones then making it into the show in any meaningful way. In this video, we're going to be looking at Alannys Harlaw, the mother of Theon and Asha Greyjoy, and what her role in the books is, and why I think she may have been cut from the show. Alannys Harlaw is the wife of Lord Balon Greyjoy, the Lord Reaper of Pike, and sister to Lord Roderick Harlaw. She had 4 children with Balon. Roderick, born between 267 and 274 AC, Maron, between 268 and 275 AC, Asha around the year 276, and Theon Greyjoy in the year 278. However, only 2 of her children remained to her, with Roderick and Maron dying during the Greyjoy Rebellion of 289 AC. Alannys has long white hair that was once said to be dark in colour and thin skin. Although she was never considered a conventional beauty, she once had a strong face and laughing eyes. In her later years, by the time of the main book series, she has become frail and sickly, with a troubling cough that appears to be worsening. Alannys has lost much of her mental faculties, with the reasoning behind it not clear. However, her frequently forgetting that her sons, Roderick and Maron, died many years ago suggests this mental decline could be linked to the stress of the loss of her sons. During her husband Balon Greyjoy's rebellion against King Robert Baratheon and the Iron Throne in 289 AC, Alannys was briefly the Queen of the Iron Islands, given her husband had proclaimed himself king. Thus, it is also assumed that their children may have also used royal titles such as Prince and Princess as well. The rebellion was brutal for House Greyjoy and the Iron Islands, with King Robert managing to rally near on the whole of the Seven Kingdoms to his banner, bringing together the High Lords of Westeros against a single cause. Her 2 eldest sons, Roderick and Maron, were killed during the rebellion. Roderick was killed at Seaguard when he led a longship in the storming of Seaguard. Lord Jason Mallister killed him beneath the castle walls and threw the Iron Men back into the sea. Maron was killed when King Robert and his forces managed to reach the Iron Islands and lay siege to Pike, backing King Balon into a corner he could not escape from. During the siege, Maron was along the walls where the breach was made along the Old South Tower. He was crushed when the tower collapsed. While Alannys' youngest and last son Theon was not killed, the boy was taken as a hostage by Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell. Given the boy was now the heir to the lordship of Pike, it was hoped that this would prevent his father from attempting to rebel again. After the war, Alannys brought 5 boys, including a young Christopher Botley, to Pike to foster. Christopher in particular became very close with Alannys' daughter Asha. However, after Christopher and Asha were supposedly caught touching each other by Pike's maester, Quaelin, Christopher was sent to Blacktide and made a ward of Baelor Blacktide, the Lord of Blacktide. It is said that Christopher did try many times to write to Asha, but the maesters at Blacktide never sent the letters, fearing angering Alannys. As time passed, Alannys began to roam the halls of Pike in search of her lost sons, even walking the rope bridge to the sea tower while barefoot. She eventually moved to 10 Towers to live with her sister Alannys Harlaw, as Harlaw is said to be less raw than Pike. During the events of the main books, during a clash of kings, when Theon Greyjoy returns home for the first time since he was taken as a ward by Eddard Stark, he expects to find his mother on Pike, only to find she has been living at 10 Towers for years and not expected to return to Pike due to her poor health. Alannys' husband, Theon's father, Lord Balon Greyjoy, then proceeds to declare himself king of the Iron Islands and the North, seeing how the mainland Westeros was in chaos at the onset of the War of 5 Kings. Though technically estranged from her husband, Alannys would be considered a queen once again. After the unplanned capture of Winterfell by Theon, Asha Greyjoy advises her brother to abandon the castle and return to Deepwood Motte for their mother's sake, knowing that Theon had no hope of holding the castle with the few men he had. Asha, growing up around her mother's grief for her lost sons, knows the impact Theon's death would have on her, breaking Alannys completely. But Theon refuses, and is later captured by Ramsay Bolton and presumed dead by many of the Ironborn. Later during the events of A Storm of Swords, when Balon is killed by his brother Euron at Pike, Alannys then becomes a widow. During the events of A Feast for Crows, after the events of the King's Moot and crowning of Euron Greyjoy as king, Asha flees to the safety of Harlaw and Ten Towers. It is there we learn that Alannys lives in the Widow's Tower at Ten Towers, the castle of her brother, Lord Rodrik. Asha visits her mother before her departure to Deepwood Motte in the north. Her brother Rodrik feels that Alannys is beginning to recover on Harlaw somewhat, though she is still frail. But Asha thinks that Alannys is a shadow of her former self. She does ask after Theon, with Asha just telling her mother her father sent him raiding the Stony Shore, not wanting to tell her the true truth of the matter. Alannys is convinced that her husband Balon was murdered, which he indeed was. She also gives her consent for Christopher Botley to marry Asha. However, Asha has absolutely no intentions of doing so, and unless The Winds of Winter is one day released, that is all we currently know of Alannys Harlaw. Given the changes made to the Ironborn storyline in Game of Thrones and how many main characters were cut from it, is not a surprise at all that Alannys never made it into the show. With the changes to the King's Moot and the lack of the other supporting characters, as well as the difference between Asha and her show version Yara, it all equates to Alannys being an easy character to cut, despite how much I enjoy what her character does bring to the story. When I think of Alannys, I see many parallels to Catlyn Stark, both women who lost children, with it impacting them deeply on a psychological level. While in Catlyn's case, her grief and loss become symbolised in who she becomes in Lady Stoneheart after her resurrection, Alannys too is clearly fundamentally changed by the loss of her children, and like Catlyn, is damaged, albeit in a very different way. I do maybe wonder if the fact there is a lot of thematic crossover with some of Catlyn's story could potentially be a reason why the showrunners felt cutting her would not take much away from the story.